What happens when the most powerful military on Earth sets a deadline to destroy another nation? According to recent statements from the White House, we may be about to find out. Former President Donald Trump has issued what some analysts are calling the most aggressive ultimatum against Iran in modern history, threatening total destruction by a specific date and time. The deadline in question? 8 p.m. Eastern Time on April 7th, which translates to 5 a.m. on April 8th in Indian Standard Time. This isn't normal diplomatic pressure. This is something far more dangerous, and the world is watching to see whether it's a bluff or the beginning of a regional catastrophe that could reshape global energy markets and trigger the widest Middle Eastern conflict in decades. The crisis began accelerating after Israel conducted repeated strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in Natanz and Isfahan. These weren't isolated incidents. They represented a deliberate targeting of Iran's most sensitive infrastructure, facilities that have been under international scrutiny for years. Trump's rhetoric escalated dramatically following these attacks, with public statements threatening to reduce Iran to rubble within a single night. The language used wasn't the careful diplomatic phrasing we typically hear from world leaders. It was direct, absolute, and according to several American journalists, potentially indicative of plans that go beyond conventional military operations. Tucker Carlson, one of America's most prominent conservative commentators, made an unprecedented appeal on his podcast. He urged military commanders and Pentagon officials to refuse any order from Trump involving nuclear weapons against Iran. This wasn't a casual observation. It was a direct plea to the chain of command to consider disobedience if such orders were given. The fact that mainstream American media personalities are openly discussing potential nuclear strikes tells us how serious this situation has become. MSNBC anchor Lawrence O'Donnell stated bluntly on his show that Trump's Easter morning statement was beneath the dignity of the presidency, and that impeachment proceedings should have begun the moment those words were posted. The constitutional framers who created impeachment provisions never imagined an American president would publicly threaten the annihilation of an entire nation in such explicit terms. Yet here we are. What makes this moment particularly significant is that portions of the American media establishment, which often aligns with defense policy narratives, are now breaking ranks to oppose what they see as reckless warmongering. This internal division within American media and political circles reveals deep anxiety about where this confrontation is headed. Meanwhile, Iran has responded not with capitulation but with a sophisticated multi-layered strategy that combines military preparedness, diplomatic outreach, and public mobilization. Iranian President Pezeshkian announced that over 15 million Iranians are prepared to make sacrifices in defense of their country. This isn't merely nationalist rhetoric. The Iranian government has launched a coordinated campaign encouraging citizens to form human chains around critical infrastructure, particularly power plants that Trump has explicitly threatened to destroy. The strategic logic here is straightforward but profound. By placing civilians around these facilities, Iran is sending an unmistakable message that any attack would constitute a war crime under international law. The deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure with knowledge that non-combatants are present would violate the Geneva Conventions and potentially expose American and Israeli leadership to international prosecution. Iran's approach has been remarkably diverse. While preparing militarily for potential strikes, Tehran has simultaneously engaged in what could be called cultural diplomacy. Videos have emerged showing Iranian musicians performing traditional instruments outside threatened power plants. One musician, Ali Gamsari, posted footage of himself playing the tar, a Persian string instrument, near the Dama power facility. His message was simple but powerful. He expressed hope that the sound of music might inspire peace and keep the lights on in Iranian homes. This blending of defiance and artistic expression is designed to humanize the potential victims of any American attack. It forces the international community to confront the reality that military targets are surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives. The Iranian government has also deployed sophisticated information warfare tactics. Iranian embassies around the world have been posting cartoons and videos that mock American military failures and highlight contradictions in U.S. policy. One cartoon referenced George Floyd, the African-American man whose death sparked global protests, showing Trump in a similar position, saying he cannot breathe, trapped in the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Another video showed wreckage of American military equipment, including F-35 fighters and MQ-9 drones, being hauled away like scrap metal on pickup trucks through Iranian streets. These images are designed to undermine the narrative of American invincibility and suggest that Iran has successfully countered the most advanced military technology in the world. But beyond the propaganda, there are hard strategic realities at play. Trump's shifting deadlines have become a subject of international ridicule, but they also reveal genuine uncertainty within American decision-making circles. The original 48-hour deadline announced on March 21st was extended to 5 days, then 10 days, then reset to 48 hours again on April 4th before being extended to April 7th at 8 p.m. Trump himself acknowledged this pattern when questioned by journalists, saying he gave 11 days instead of 10 because he wanted to be nice. This is not the language of confident military planning. It suggests internal debates, possible resistance from military commanders, or recognition that the consequences of action are far more severe than initially calculated. The targeting of infrastructure has already begun in earnest. Israel claims to have destroyed Iran's largest petrochemical complex, asserting that 85% of Iran's petrochemical export capacity has been eliminated. If accurate, this represents a catastrophic blow to the Iranian economy. Petrochemicals are not luxury goods. They are fundamental inputs for fertilizers, plastics, pharmaceuticals, textiles, packaging, and thousands of other products that sustain modern life. Iran responded by striking Saudi Arabia's Jubail industrial city, one of the world's largest petrochemical production zones. This facility produces 600,000 tons of petrochemicals annually and hosts joint ventures with ExxonMobil, Shell, and Saudi Basic Industries Corporation, the fourth largest petrochemical manufacturer globally. Local videos reportedly show flames rising from the complex, though Saudi authorities claim only debris from intercepted missiles fell in the area. The economic implications of this mutual destruction extend far beyond the Middle East. If Iran and Gulf states continue targeting each other's petrochemical facilities, global supply chains will face severe disruptions. Every factory that depends on petrochemical inputs will struggle with shortages and price increases. Consumers worldwide will feel this through higher costs for everything from clothing to electronics to food packaging. This is already happening. Within 1 month of escalating conflict, gasoline prices in the United States increased by $1 per gallon, a massive jump by American standards. A Senate committee report revealed that California families alone spent an additional $700 million on fuel in just 1 month due to war-related price increases. This economic pressure is likely contributing to Trump's erratic behavior and shifting deadlines. Saudi Arabia finds itself in a particularly painful position. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced a $600 billion investment plan in the United States during a November 2025 White House visit, positioning Saudi Arabia as a major global economic player. 5 months later, that grand vision is colliding with harsh reality. The Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 economic transformation program is faltering due to budget constraints, questionable project designs, and now war. The kingdom has already suffered an estimated $8 billion in losses. Half of its oil supply capacity is offline. Most offshore oil fields are closed. Major events, including a Formula One race and a capital markets forum, have been canceled. Virgin Atlantic suspended its daily flights to Riyadh. American companies operating in the kingdom have told employees to work from home. The King Abdullah Financial District and several business parks have temporarily closed. Why is Saudi Arabia enduring this punishment? Iran has repeatedly stated that if Gulf nations simply asked the United States to remove its military presence from their territory, the conflict could de-escalate. Yet no such request has come. Investigative reporting by France 24 confirmed Iranian accusations that Kuwait is allowing American forces to launch missiles from Kuwaiti territory toward Iran. Analysis of videos circulating on social media on March 24th and March 31st showed launches consistent with HIMARS rocket systems firing southward from Kuwait toward Iranian targets. Kuwait officially denies these allegations, but the evidence suggests active participation in the American military campaign. Iran has responded by attacking Kuwaiti refineries and water treatment plants. Every Gulf state participating in or hosting American military operations against Iran is now experiencing the consequences. The strategic calculations are becoming increasingly complex. Before the war, approximately 130 oil tankers passed through the Strait of Hormuz daily. Currently, only 5 to 10 tankers are making the journey, and these are vessels loaded before hostilities intensified. No new loading operations are occurring in Gulf ports. The global energy supply chain is rapidly approaching a breaking point. Nepal has instituted a 2-day weekend to conserve fuel. Sri Lanka is importing emergency supplies from China. Bangladesh has mandated that shopping malls close by 7 p.m. Pakistan has reduced government office operations to 4 days per week, with 50% staffing levels. European countries are expected to feel significant impacts within the current week. By mid-April, American supplies from the Gulf will likely cease entirely. Iran has declared that the Strait of Hormuz will never again function normally for American and Israeli shipping, regardless of how this conflict ends. The military dimension reveals equally troubling trends. Initial assessments suggested that American and Israeli air defenses were intercepting 90 to 92% of Iranian missiles and drones, with only 3% reaching their targets. Recent data indicates this success rate has collapsed. Current interception rates have fallen to approximately 73%, meaning 27% of Iranian projectiles are now hitting their intended targets. The United Arab Emirates reports that Iran has launched 23 cruise missiles, 498 ballistic missiles, and 2,141 drones against Emirati territory. The UAE claims damage has been limited, but the sustainability of this defense posture is questionable. Iran has begun employing short-range missiles and drones, firing over 35,000 projectiles at Gulf targets in recent weeks. Attack frequency has increased to 70 to 80 strikes against the UAE within 24-hour periods. Perhaps most concerning from an American strategic perspective is evidence that Iran's command and control systems remain intact despite targeted assassinations of senior leadership. Financial Times analysis concluded that continued missile launches following leadership decapitation indicate a functional centralized command system operating effectively without visible commanders. This is the 38th day of a conflict in which Iran stands against the world's two most powerful military forces. American claims of destroying 90% of Iranian missile capacity appear exaggerated. Reuters reported on March 27, citing U.S. sources, that officials in Washington privately acknowledge only one-third of Iranian missiles have been destroyed. The gap between public claims and private assessments suggests an adversary far more resilient than anticipated. Diplomatic efforts have produced no meaningful progress. Axios reported on April 6 that a comprehensive deal between Iran and the United States appears impossible under current conditions. Negotiators are now focused on achieving a 45-day ceasefire as an interim measure. Trump acknowledged during Easter ceremonies that a proposal had been presented, calling it a significant step but insufficient. Within hours, reports emerged that Iran had rejected the offer. Social media discussions reference a 10-point Iranian counterproposal reportedly transmitted through Pakistani intermediaries. The substance of this proposal would require the United States to accept what amounts to a strategic defeat. Trump's response to questions about the Iranian terms suggested frustration and confusion rather than confident strategy. The New York Times assessed that current proposals will not resolve core issues before Trump's stated deadline expires. The human costs are mounting across the region. Casualty figures remain contested and unreliable, as is typical in active conflicts. What is clear is that civilian infrastructure has become a primary target for all parties. Trump has explicitly threatened to destroy Iran's power plants and bridges, infrastructure essential to civilian life. Iran has responded by targeting similar facilities in Gulf states. This mutual assured economic destruction is creating a humanitarian catastrophe that extends beyond combatant nations. Countries dependent on Gulf energy supplies are implementing emergency rationing measures. The global economy, still recovering from previous shocks, now faces an energy crisis that could trigger recession across multiple regions simultaneously. The question of nuclear weapons remains deeply troubling. While no credible evidence suggests imminent nuclear use, the very fact that serious American commentators are publicly discussing the possibility indicates how far normal deterrence frameworks have degraded. Nuclear weapons have not been used in combat since 1945, precisely because their use would cross a threshold from which there is no return. The destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed over 200,000 people and demonstrated consequences so horrific that even in the depths of the Cold War, American and Soviet leaders pulled back from the brink. For Trump to casually threaten destruction of an entire nation in a single night invokes that nuclear shadow, whether explicitly stated or not. Iranian officials have noted this rhetoric and responded by emphasizing their population's willingness to sacrifice, a message designed to demonstrate that even nuclear threats will not produce capitulation. The international system appears paralyzed. The G20, G7, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and other multilateral frameworks that supposedly govern global affairs have proven utterly irrelevant to preventing or managing this crisis. No meaningful intervention has come from the United Nations Security Council. European nations issue statements of concern but take no concrete action. China and Russia, often portrayed as counterweights to American power, have not leveraged their influence to halt the escalation. The Gulf Cooperation Council, directly threatened by this conflict, cannot unite its own members to demand an end to hostilities. This institutional failure reveals a harsh truth about contemporary global governance. The structures exist, the meetings occur, the communiques are issued, but actual power to prevent determined nations from pursuing military objectives is virtually non-existent. What happens next depends on decisions being made in Washington, Tehran, and Tel Aviv over the next several hours. If Trump's deadline passes without major military action, his credibility will suffer significant damage, potentially emboldening Iran and constraining future American options. If strikes proceed as threatened, the regional consequences could spiral beyond anyone's control. Iran has prepared its population for massive retaliation. Gulf states hosting American forces will face continued Iranian attacks. Global energy markets will experience severe disruption with unpredictable economic consequences. The possibility of miscalculation leading to wider war increases dramatically once large-scale military operations begin. A single incident, an unintended civilian massacre, a missile striking the wrong target could transform a limited strike into regional conflagration involving multiple nations. The strategic landscape has shifted fundamentally over these 38 days. Iran has demonstrated resilience that surprised Western analysts. Its ability to maintain missile operations despite intense bombardment and leadership assassinations suggests deeper military capacity than previously assessed. The economic warfare dimension has proven mutually destructive, harming Gulf states as much as Iran. American military technology, while formidable, has not achieved the dominance that would allow quick, decisive victory. Most critically, Iran's strategy of internationalizing the conflict through information operations and mobilizing civilian resistance has complicated the narrative of liberation that might have justified intervention. When musicians play traditional instruments outside power plants and families form human chains around critical infrastructure, the image of precision strikes against military targets becomes much harder to sustain. The coming hours will reveal whether diplomacy can still avert catastrophe or whether we are witnessing the final countdown to a war whose consequences no one can fully predict. What is certain is that the old frameworks for managing Middle Eastern conflicts have failed. The assumptions that guided American policy for decades no longer hold. The belief that overwhelming military force can reshape regions according to Western preferences has been tested and found wanting in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and now potentially Iran. Yet the lesson remains unlearned, and the consequences of that failure may soon become devastatingly clear. As the clock counts down to Trump's deadline, the world watches to see whether reason will prevail or whether we are about to witness the transformation of threats into terrible reality.